I never expected a business trip to change everything. After years of marriage, my life had settled into a comfortable routine. Predictable, stable, and safe. But sometimes, it's the most innocent-seeming circumstances that ignite the most dangerous desires. The company had sent me to New York for a 3-day conference. My husband, Mark, kissed me goodbye at the airport, his usual smile in place. "Call me when you land, Em," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His eyes were warm, familiar. I nodded, smiling back. "I will." I felt a flutter of excitement, mixed with guilt, as I walked toward the gate. It was just a trip. I needed to be away, to breathe. The steady rhythm of my life had begun to feel like a cage, one I didn't realize I was locked inside. Until recently. The flight was late. I slumped into my seat by the window, trying to ignore the stress bubbling in my chest. I pulled out a book, trying to lose myself in the words. But my eyes kept darting toward the aisle. Passengers filed in, stowing bags and settling into their seats. And then, he walked in, tall, with broad shoulders, and a confidence that filled the narrow aisle. His dark hair was tousled just enough to look effortless, and the corners of his mouth lifted in an easy half-smile. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, swept over the rows, until they landed on the empty seat beside me. "Looks like I'm your seatmate," he said, his voice low and warm. I smiled politely. "Lucky me." He laughed softly, a sound that curled around me like silk. He slid into the seat, his arm brushing against mine. My breath caught. Just an accident, I told myself, but something about the way he settled in, so close and yet so nonchalant, set off a spark inside me. The flight took off smoothly. Outside, the world faded into a blur of clouds and sky. I tried to focus on my book, but his presence was impossible to ignore. The scent of his cologne, a mix of cedarwood and something faintly citrus, filled the small space between us. "What are you reading?" he asked, his voice breaking through my thoughts. I glanced at the cover. "Oh, just a mystery novel." "A woman of intrigue," he teased, his eyes dancing. I chuckled, a blush creeping up my neck. "I guess you could say that." He leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. "I'm Daniel, by the way." "Emma." "Well, Emma, what takes you to New York?" "Work," I replied. "A conference?" He nodded. "Same here. Marketing seminar." Our eyes met, and something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, interest, maybe something more. I looked away, my heart beating faster. The conversation flowed effortlessly after that. We talked about everything and nothing. His laugh was infectious, his smile disarming. I found myself leaning in closer, hanging on his words. It felt like I'd known him for longer than just a few hours. I forgot about the time, the plane, even Mark waiting at home. A few hours into the flight, the lights dimmed. Most of the passengers drifted off to sleep, the hum of the engines a low lullaby. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how close we were. Daniel's shoulder brushed mine again, this time more deliberate. His fingers tapped on the armrest, a rhythmic pattern that matched the quickening beat of my heart. "Emma," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cabin noise. "Can I ask you something?" I swallowed hard. "Sure." "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to let go? Just for a little while?" I turned to look at him. His eyes searched mine, deep and endless. The question hung between us, heavy with meaning. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice trembling. His hand found mine on the armrest. His fingers, warm and steady, curled around mine. The touch was electric, sending shivers through my body. "Me too," he said. My breath caught. I knew I should pull away. I should remind myself, that I was married. But his touch felt like freedom, like possibility, like everything I hadn't known I was missing. The plane landed late at night. The city lights sprawled beneath us, a sea of gold and white. My mind was a whirl of confusion and desire. Daniel's hand still lingered near mine. His presence a constant pull. We disembarked together, walking side by side through the terminal. The world felt too bright, too real. "Where are you staying?" he asked, his voice soft. "The Midtown Plaza?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Me too." We stood by the baggage claim, the tension between us crackling like a live wire. My suitcase appeared, and I grabbed it, my hands shaking. "Emma," he murmured, stepping closer. "Come have a drink with me. Just one." I hesitated, my heart hammering. "One drink. Just one." "Okay," I whispered. The hotel bar was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of whiskey and leather. We sat in a corner booth, away from the crowd. He ordered us drinks, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me the glass. "To new connections," he toasted, his eyes never leaving mine. I clinked my glass against his. "To possibilities." The whiskey burned down my throat, a sharp contrast to the warmth spreading through my body. We talked, laughed, the world outside shrinking until it was just the two of us. His knee pressed against mine under the table. His gaze dropped to my lips. "Emma," he whispered, his voice rough. "Tell me to stop." But I didn't want him to. I leaned in, my lips brushing his. The kiss was slow, tentative, but the fire behind it was undeniable. He deepened the kiss, his hand sliding up to cut my cheek. For the first time in years, I felt alive, reckless, free. We pulled apart, breathless. His forehead rested against mine. "Come upstairs with me," he murmured. My heart screamed yes. My mind screamed no. But the line between right and wrong had never felt thinner. "I can't," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm glad I met you, Emma." "Me too," I said, my voice breaking. I stood up, my legs shaking. He didn't try to stop me. I walked away, each step an agony, but in my heart, I knew this moment would haunt me forever. I returned to my room, collapsing onto the bed. The weight of what almost happened pressed down on me. I thought of Mark, of the life we'd built, safe, predictable, but for one night, I'd touched the edge of something wild, and I wasn't sure if I could ever go back.